Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you all and thank you all for coming to Russell J. Thomsen's memorial service. It's been a kind of a wait, Tina, and I'm so glad we can have it, and it is a beautiful day. We're thankful to God for all your safe travels from where hither and yon that you have come, and we just want to thank our God for the chance we have to celebrate and to share this day together. Let's bow our heads in prayer. Father in heaven, we are just so grateful for your magnificent love and how you've shared that with us in so many ways, in the ways mostly, though, you like to share it through people. And we thank you for Russell, and we ask now that you will grace our gathering with your Holy Spirit's presence, and that you will manifest your presence among us today as we come to remember, to laugh, to cry, to rejoice in the works of your hands. So we just ask now that you will send your Spirit and bless us this afternoon. In Jesus' name we give you all thanks and praise. Amen.
In your bulletins, you have a brief history of Russell's life. I have not one of Russell's books, but I have a little bit more information to share with you. Russell John Thomsen was born December 15, 1941, 8 days after the attack on Pearl Harbor. He was born to Mabel and Herman Thomsen in Chehalis, Washington. Russ and his twin sister Barb were born 3 years after their brother Dwayne. And that was on a 40-acre farm in Centralia. My grandparents also had a farm in Centralia, so I have many, many fond memories of being on their farm. But on Russ's farm, they had a lot of maple trees, fir trees, alder and cedar trees. His father's love of trees poured into Russ a lifelong love of trees. He grew up in a hardworking family to keep food on the table, and they raised a lot of chickens, cows, picked a lot of berries, cultivated a vegetable garden, and provided, anyway, sustenance for their family. 1 year after Russ was still, or 1 year while Russ was still in grade school, the family was so poor that he only had one outfit to wear and only one pair of shoes. Russ graduated from Centralia High School in 1960, that last year as Boys Club president. He often said that his most useful class was typing. In 1963, he served as student missionary off the coast of British Columbia. In 1964, he graduated from Walla Walla College, now Walla Walla University. And that was a feat that seemed insurmountable following a truck pedestrian collision January 1st of that year. Severe fractures kept him in a body brace and on crutches for the rest of the year. But he was already accepted for medical school at Loma Linda University, and so as his strengths were brought out, he continued to struggle, finished his classes, and worked that summer in construction of all things, even though he still had continuing back pain. With the aid of Russell's sister Barb, he met Tina Johnson, who was the 5th grade teacher at the same Adventist school in San Bernardino, where Barb taught home economics. And Russ and Tina were married on August 8th, 1965. In 1968, he received his medical degree and master's degree in religion from Loma Linda University. He went on to complete his internship and residency in obstetrics and gynecology at Latter-day Saints Hospital and the University of Utah in Salt Lake City from 1968 to 1972. And it was in Salt Lake City where Russ and Tina's sons, Randy and Greg, were born. Russell served in the United States Army Medical Corps for 27 years in such varied places at Fort Polk, Louisiana, Fort Ord, California, Frankfurt, Germany, Fort Belvoir in Virginia, Fort Wainwright, Alaska, and Vicenza, Italy. The lovely and varied sights and experiences had long-lasting values for his family. For 3 years, he worked for the United States Agency for the International Development, or USAID for short, in the areas of women's health and family planning, an assignment which took him to nearly 50 countries. He retired in 1994 as a full colonel, with the distinction of safely delivering 4,000 babies. His patients genuinely appreciated his professional yet caring manner. A highlight of his career was an unexpected call in 1973 to testify before a congressional subcommittee concerning the failure of the Food and Drug Administration to regulate the testing and marketing of intrauterine devices. Stationed at Fort Polk at the time, he had an alarming number of patients suffering complications from the Dalkon Shield. His letters to the FDA, the Federal Trade Commission, and Congress ignited enough concern to subpoena this young doctor to testify. What was to be a 15-minute testimony gave way to several hours because of the keen interest of his questioners. And as a result, Stock and A.J. Robbins, distributor of the Dalkon Shield, took a dramatic plunge that afternoon and was subsequently taken off the market. The next day, there was no small stir in the media in the Fort Polk clinic where Dr. Thomsen was working and throughout the U.S. Army Medical Corps. What was rewarding were the many letters from women expressing gratitude for someone who had the courage to speak out for the pain, lost pregnancies, and horrible surgeries that the Dalkon Shield had caused. Following his testimony, Dr. Thomsen started collecting IUDs, a professional hobby that over the years developed into the Russel J. Thomsen Contraceptive Collection, now housed in the Department of Archives and Special Collections, University Libraries at Loma Linda University. That useful high school typing class gave birth to the writing of several published books. The first one, Latter-day Saints and the Sabbath, his master's thesis, which evolved from a friendship with a lovely Mormon couple that lived next door to Russ and Tina in Loma Linda. A second book, Seventh-day Baptists, Their Legacy to Adventists, was an outgrowth from a friendship with a Seventh-day Baptist couple. Over a period of years, Russ read the Bible from cover to cover, highlighting any scripture that focused on health and medical issues. Out of that study came the book, The Bible Book of Medical Wisdom. He also authored an atlas of intrauterine contraception and many medical papers for professional journals. And on a lighter note, he created a delightfully illustrated manuscript for children, Leo, the Left-Pawed Lion, which didn't quite make it for publication. Russ had a great love for the outdoors, and after retirement in 1994, settling in Silverdale, Washington, Russ and Tina purchased a plot of land on the corner of Newberry Hill and Sesame Street. How he loved to look upon and show others the mature Douglas firs and majestic maples. He fondly collected the foxglove seeds, planting them along the Newberry roadside for walkers and drivers to enjoy the striking stalks of pink flowers in the spring. When Russ became more limited to outdoor activity, he enjoyed neighborhood squirrels coming to our back glass door begging for peanuts. He was more than happy to oblige. He also enjoyed watching the hummingbirds flying to and fro to our feeder, catching a drink in between. Complementing Russ's love of nature came the avid interest in capturing on camera a lovely variety of flowers, which Tina has made into note cards. His photography interest extended to castles and monuments in Europe, notable sites in our nation's capital, barns, sunsets, many other scenes in nature. Some of his gems made it into calendars and the cover of a magazine. In his earlier years, Russ thrived in various church capacities. He loved to lead a vigorous singing of hymns with Tina at the piano, and along with a team of Sabbath school superintendents, he led some innovative programs. That is when we had programs before the lesson study. He directed Pathfinder clubs and coached basketball teams, first in Virginia for his sons and their friends, and later at KACS with Kelly Pick. Often working with his hands, he started constructing storage sheds in Virginia, teaching Randy and Greg in their preteen years how to use tools to construct something useful. He also crafted appealing art pieces with wood, stone, string, and hardware. He later had a hand in constructing 4 extensions to their Silverdale home. Creative in another way, early in the 1900s, he designed the prototype of a product that he named Baby Dater. At first hearing, many wondered what that could be. The 6-sided folder in its latest edition computes, records important data during pregnancy, labor and delivery, and the baby's first year. He collaborated with Elena Kucharik, illustrator of the Care Bear line and Little Blessings books, to their delightful artwork, for her delightful artwork. Other products followed under the same company name: pregnancy calendar, baby's first year calendar, 2 different growth chart designs, and a wedding dater, among even more. Several of these products were sold in Hallmark stores and given as registry gifts at JCPenney stores. Russ and his family had a variety of pets through the years: hamsters, guinea pigs, dwarf rabbits, and a cat. But it was their cockapoo lab, Angel, in which he took a special interest. He loved to train her to do many tricks: jumping through hoops, climbing ladders, walking across to another ladder and climbing down, along with catching balls and frisbees. He often put on shows for family and friends, one time for a group in a hospital where he was stationed. Those who knew Russ or had occasion to visit, even a short time, found that he loved to engage in conversation, and even more, to tell stories from his past. And there were many from his growing up years: his medical training, his eventful 27 years serving in the military, and from his own family. Russ also had a heart for helping others, especially those he perceived were in need. When shopping in Safeway, he took joy in paying for the groceries of a family in line in front of him. There was profound gratitude expressed from the struggling mothers. One important area must be included, and that is his love for sacred music. He grew up in a family where singing hymns and playing instruments was very much encouraged. Tina also grew up in a home where sacred music was part of their lives. That all came together soon after Russ and Tina met. Both participated in the Messiah performance at Loma Linda University Church in December of 1964. Russ playing his clarinet and Tina singing in the choir. Even though music, praising the Lord, was important throughout their married life, it took on a greater significance as Russ's health started to decline. He would love to watch YouTube memorable singers like Sandy Patty singing "We Shall Behold Him," another singing "Because He Lives, I Can Face Tomorrow," and various choirs singing "Thou Didst Leave Thy Throne." Tears would come to his eyes. The love of Jesus had become more precious to him. During the last 8 months, when he no longer had any interest in television or the energy to watch YouTube, the CDs of hymns, both sung and instrumental, which he and Tina had enjoyed for years, became his sole enjoyment apart from Tina's visits to him at Clearbrook Inn assisted living and that of others until the COVID-19 restrictions put a stop to that. It was heartening to learn from the nurses that he would sing along with the music. That was his thread to holding onto Jesus as he looked forward to his second coming. Russell passed away in his sleep Monday evening, July 27, 2020, after a long illness at the age of 78. He is survived by his wife Tina, of nearly 55 years, sons Randy Thomsen of Absaroka, Montana, and Greg Thomsen of Federal, Washington, brother Dwayne Thomsen of Pasco, Washington, twin sister Barbara Speck of Portland, Oregon, 3 grandchildren, AJ, Crystal, and Josie, and many nieces and nephews.
I'm Dwayne Thomsen, and I was privileged to be the older brother for Russell and his sister Barbara. Russ, we will miss you, and we extend our sympathy to Tina and her family.
I am Barbara, Russell's twin sister. Dr. Steck was a very important person in our life. He had the first impact on delivering Dwayne. And about a year later, Dad was back in the hospital with his wife. My mom said, "Thank you for the boy. Now go get me a girl." So Dad waited, and here came the doctor saying, "It's a girl." So Dad was very relieved and had some stories to tell everybody all through the years. One of us was 6 pounds, 1 ounce, and one was 1 ounce under 6 pounds. And this was to a lady who was 5'2", weighed about 100 pounds. The baby was 6 weeks premature.
Growing up with Russell was never boring. We had lots of fun. We played together, worked together, and sometimes got into trouble together. We will share some stories, some funny, some more serious. Russell achieved a lot of things in his career, but he also had some major achievements growing up. These stories will give you a little insight into the Russell we knew.
Our first story is getting into trouble. We grew up on a chicken farm. Mom would clean and candle the eggs and put them in crates. She usually did this out in a barn. And when it got real cold, she brought her operation into the house. One day, she put a couple of baskets of eggs on the kitchen counter. Quickly, she put Russ and Barb on the counter as well and went to get something outside, leaving Dwayne to take care of us. When Mom arrived back by the kitchen, she heard a lot of laughter. Knowing this was trouble probably, Dwayne was throwing eggs and we were laughing. Of course, the twins started to experiment. And the dynamics of egg throwing is that they go into the lowest spot. So into the dining room was this room full of eggs on the floor. Unfortunately, our fun soon came to an end when Mom walked into the house. She sent Dwayne out to get a switch. By the time she was done with Dwayne, Russ and I were crying so hard that she didn't have the heart to use the switch on us.
One time, Russell became very sick. For a while, looked at the lights and that he had turned off and hadn't turned off, and we made an interesting discovery. All the light switches he didn't turn off had their brand name on the switch. The brand was Leviathan. Leave it on. Tina commented to me about Russell's love of trees. The special tree was a large fir tree on the hill next to the barn with a swing on it. We would also play under the tree with our trucks and tractors and toy logging equipment, make roads and log mills and start whatever we imagined. The upper part of our valley was very beautiful. It had large trees and ferns and fallen logs covered with moss. There was a small dam with a small pond about 8 to 12 feet across. We spent many hours playing at our little lake, ocean, whatever we wanted it to be.
We were playing on the hill one day and saw bees flying in and out of a stump. We ran down to the with us to look at it. She watched it for a while and didn't see any more bees. She looked at the stump, showed here being held by Dwayne's grandson, Christian. She was sure we were wrong. There couldn't be any bees in that little stump, and so she stuck her fingers under the ledge where we had seen the bees and came out, and a bee stung her on the finger. Of course, we laughed, not too much.
The main source of income on the farm was chickens. What fun it was to get 2,000 cute baby chickens each year. Unfortunately, they don't stay young and cute. They have to be fed, watered, vaccinated, and otherwise cared for, and the eggs need to be gathered. Normally, there weren't any roosters with the laying hens, but one year the folks contracted to provide hatching eggs. They wanted a cross breed with Plymouth roosters and Rhode Island red hens. The roosters didn't bother Dad, but I was old enough to ward them off with a feed bucket or a good kick, but Russell and Barbara had to carry a stick to beat them off. I still remember both Barbara and Russell bravely picking up a stick and helping with the chickens.
Some of the stories told several times a year became legend. My folks did not leave the farm very often, but on January 13, 1950, Mom and Dwayne went to see Mom's cousin, Aunt Lily, and her cousins in Springfield, Oregon. It started snowing that morning. Dad had picked up a large refrigerator cardboard box. Russ thought that the box would be a fun thing to sleep in that night. After just getting to sleep, I heard a soft voice say, "Barb, I'm cold. Can I sleep with you?" By the end of that day, it had snowed over 21 inches, and this was the third worst winter storm in Washington's history.
We really enjoyed fireworks. We'd buy the fireworks all from the little lady fingers up to the big red salutes and the white salutes and those cherry bombs. We had lots of fun shooting them off in dirt ways into the cans and pipes, and just shooting them to listen to the echoes of the sound returned from the different hills and valleys. Russ and I would even carry some in our pockets. One day we were working on the fence between us and the neighbors, and Dad had parked his pickup on the road, leaving the keys in it. The fence was on the hill and in a spot where we could not see the road or the pickup. It turned out that we had a lot more work than we planned. The sun went down and the moon came up, and it was full moonlight, and we could easily work without any lights. We were still working on the fence at about 10 o'clock when we heard the car stop down by the road. Russ and I wanted to go down and look over the edge and see what the car was doing. But Dad said, "No, get to work." So we begged him if we could shoot off a few firecrackers, which we did. After a while, we heard the car leave. We finished our fence and went home, thinking that was the end of the story. Barbara was home when the sheriff showed up, so I will let her tell the rest of the story.
So this was in the summertime, and Mom had had some visitors come in, and we were eating out on the lawn, when up drove a strange car, the lady in it, and then we had a sheriff's car, Lewis County. And that was kind of interesting. So we started, and he explained he had stolen some chickens from us. And you folks shot at me. We usually don't shoot at people, my dad said. He was always kind of the jokester. Young lady in his car said, "You bring me up here to confess of stealing chickens? I don't think I would do that." And I hope the young man said he would do no more stealing from us. Okay.
Okay. One year, my friends Larry and Danny and I all got new fishing poles. Russell was determined to go fishing with us, so he found an old car antenna, tied a line on it, and that became his fishing pole. Larry, Danny, and I proudly fixed up our new fishing poles and went down to catch some fish. We had our lines in the water, and when Russ came along, threw his line in and caught the largest trout any of us had ever caught. The creek went through Grandpa Thomsen's land, so we started going to the open areas along the creek. Sure enough, Russell would come along, throw his line in, and catch another good trout. This went on until over the summer he had caught 5 nice fish with his antenna fishing pole. After Russ retired, I would go over and visit, and then we'd go fishing. And we had a lot of fun, even caught a few fish.
Mom noticed that the local grocery store was having help sponsor a coloring contest. Russell and I entered. Russell took top prize of a bike, and I got a phonograph. Russ earned a good portion of his way through college. He worked hard. The summers on the thrashing crew as a carpenter. To earn money, Russell used his time wisely while at Walla Walla College. He worked in the cafeteria, charging the students for their lunchtime meal. So he loved to talk, and that was a good outlet. He worked in the cafeteria. He also, that was the time he was getting paid. And he worked driving the garbage truck. He got his exercise while collecting treasures. He was like my dad in that point. Adding, "I'm getting my exercise in." Several people remember hitching a ride on the garbage truck. I needed a pair of gloves, so off in the garbage truck, he stopped in a corner in Walla Walla. I got my gloves, and when he came back, jumped in, and away we went to Walla Walla with task done. I think I'm standing beside somebody who appreciated the garbage truck, because he and his wife, Carol, had their first kiss in the garbage truck. When the band went on tour his senior year, he asked me to ride with him in the pickup where the instruments were, and he got paid for this driving time, plus he got a lot of birds added to his history biology list.
Russell, as you heard, has a number of achievements in his career, but he had the ability to recognize the problem and try to solve it. We know he objected to the Virginia Slims, cigarettes, advertising, women's tennis, so he organized a protest. He recognized the problem with the Dawkins Shield, so he testified to Congress. But while still in high school, Russell recognized a problem that would have had much more effect on the family than any of these other activities. The Centralia plywood plant was owned by the workers. You could buy shares in the plant still, which allowed you to work there. The folks bought a share, which allowed Dad to work in the firehouse. This was a job he enjoyed, and his schedule didn't include Friday night or Saturday. The plywood plant was used to cold press to glue the plywood. The newer plywood plants were all using hot presses, and the demand for cold pressed plywood dropped. The Centralia plant started losing money, and the workers were all worried about the value of their shares. The company held a meeting with the shareholders offering to buy the shares. Russell recognized that if the shareholders sold their shares, many of them would probably also lose their jobs. So Russell wrote a flyer explaining this to them and put it on the windshields of the cars that were parked outside during the meeting. Because of this flyer, the shareholders decided not to sell their shares, but instead they bought a hot press and the plant became profitable again. By doing this, Russell not only saved his father's job, but allowed Barbara and Russell and myself to work there part-time while we went to college.
Music meant a lot to Mom. Dwayne was our trumpet player. Mom decided Russ and I would learn the clarinet. We had one clarinet and two mouthpieces. In the beginning, our musical journey. In time, a new clarinet was bought for Russ. Later in my life, I asked Russ what happened to his clarinet. He said he gave it to a missionary collecting instruments for Africa. On with Russ's other musical talent. He could really put a lot of emotion into his singing. In his senior year at Walla Walla College, he needed to take homiletics, one of his religious requirements. He asked me if I would go with him for support and to play the accompaniment on his closing song. One particular Sabbath morning, we had launched into a favorite, There Is a Balm in Gilead. I was given the piano as just due when a large flower bouquet on top of the piano came crashing down on my Sunday best clothes. Pretty soon a deacon had a small towel trying to erase the damage. Through it all, Russ just kept on singing.
Russell and Barbara went to high for their freshman, sophomore years, and Barbara then went to Auburn Academy, and Russell stayed home, attending Centralia High School his junior and senior years. Russell made the most of his high school years. He earned his letter on the tennis team. He was on the debating team in the State Student Congress. His greatest accomplishment was as Boys Club president. The Boys Club was under probation when Russell became president. Under Russell, the club became active. They had the first Boys Club assembly in 3 years. They held monthly meetings featuring outside speakers such as hydroplane race driver Bill Muncie, an FBI agent, and others. The Centralia High mascot was a tiger. While Russell was Boys Club president, a man volunteered to give the school a stuffed tiger if the school would provide a display case. Russell organized a campaign to raise money for a display case for the tiger. Centralia built a new high school and moved the tiger to a prominent spot in the school entrance lobby. His son Greg treated his father to a visit to Centralia on Father's Day 2018. Barbara and I were invited, and we enjoyed seeing the tiger and reminisced about old times. Russell's cousin, Mary Lou, graduated with Russell, so I called her and asked her about Russell. She brought up his success as Boys Club president on the debate team. She also said that he won a driving contest where you drive a car through the cones and see who's the fastest to do it without knocking down the cones. Randy and Greg, did you know that your dad won a driving contest?
He was a wild driver.
Russell was the fourth student missionary sent out by Walla Walla College. The summer between his junior and senior years, Russell went as a student missionary serving on a mission boat, the Northern Light. Along the coast of British Columbia, Russell lived on one of the large logging rafts. These rafts contained not only the sawmill, but also their homes, and they were building a church that Russell helped work with. Carol and I had the privilege of driving to Vancouver, BC to bring him home.
The night of New Year's Eve, Dwayne received a phone call from Russ telling that he was in a Walla Walla hospital. Russell was heavily sedated, and nothing else he said made any sense. The next day they went down and visited him. They had changed medication, and he could get the story about his accident. A number of students went up to the mountain in 2 buses for a fun New Year's Day. The other bus was already there when the bus Russell was on started to unload. Russell, already there, began throwing snowballs at them. Russell was up to the challenge. He went behind the school bus, made some snowballs, and ran out from behind the bus onto the road to do battle. Unfortunately, a truck was driving on the road and ran into Russ, breaking his pelvis. Just a few weeks before this, Russ had received his acceptance letter to the Loma Linda Medical School. He was determined to graduate. Russ had his sister and classmates bring his books and their class notes to him so he could study in bed in the hospital while his pelvis healed.
Russell and Tina lived an army life, moving from place to place. They were gracious hosts and travel guides whenever we were able to visit them. One of our folks' favorite memories was visiting Russell and Tina in Germany. Carol and I had the wonderful times visiting Russ and Tina where Russ was stationed. We visited them in Italy, Alaska, and California. They showed us many beautiful sights, such as the Leaning Tower of Pisa.
I appreciated Russ and Tina's hospitality when we visited them in Vicenza, Italy. He shared many of the highlights of the region with our family on the trip.
A person's legacy is his children. Randy and Greg might not know it, but I can see a number of traits they received from their father. Russell will be remembered through his sons. Russell,
We have had a wonderful time growing up with you, and we will miss you dearly.
My name is Randy Thomsen, first child born to the Thomsens. I think the biggest thing that I remember growing up was the opportunities that I was given by my parents. Based on their choice to be the military family, I got to travel the world and see things that a lot of people never got to see. But as a young boy, with my brother in the back of our Volkswagen van, playing our games, being constantly told to, hey, pay attention. Didn't ring a bell till later in life when I'm like, he was right. Watch as life goes by. It will affect you as things come throughout your life, and seeing how Europe was such an old country and how they'd been through so much adversity. It was like, if they can do it, I can do it. A lot of my memories are from the European travels, the castles we got to see, and of course, Dad and his camera, and always trying to find the perfect shot. Instead of being there for an hour, we could be there for 2 or 3 till the sun was just right. We got to get it glistening off of the lake over here, And as a boy, my brother and I are wandering around in the trees like, Dad's kind of nuts. But, looking back, I understand. He always saw the best of things. And I think that also came through in his choice of becoming a doctor. He could always see the broken, the hurt, and how to make it better. In Europe, he taught us about a tradition that they have called junking. Now, we as Americans are used to just, use it and throw it away, it's gone. In Europe, the smaller little towns had one night every month where they'd get rid of the older stuff, and we'd travel around in the van and he'd be swinging in because there was a pile of something, there might be something good. And we'd start going through things and, out of this one would come a cabinet, and it was missing a door or missing the glass. And I never saw it. It was like, what is this? It's broken. People are throwing it away. But he would take it home, put it away, and then when time allowed, he'd make a new door for it or cut the window, and get it just right. We do still have a lot of those things in the house. Those to me show, he could see the inner good. And me growing up, I probably wasn't the best of kids. I got in trouble, but I knew that Mom and Dad were always there. It didn't matter how bad I screwed up. They were always there. As we traveled throughout the Frankfurt area, we come across one of his favorite collections, which is the Kleiner Lauterwagons. They're the small wagons that the Europeans used to do gardening, to take milk to the market and everything. And same thing, he would find ones that were just broken down. And I remember piling one on top. I was reminded of this again the other day. Piling it on top of our Volkswagen van and headed home, and we were so proud we had another one. We come to the intersection and went to take off, and this goes back to Dad's driving. I think he turned the corner a little too fast, and that wagon came off the top. It's like, no, Dad, just keep driving. No, don't stop. Oh, no, we got to rescue that. So we stopped, jumped out, and got it. It is actually in the living room now, or what's left of it. We weren't able to resurrect it 100%, but just his carpentry came through a lot. Again, with the military, we moved a lot, and sometimes you were lucky enough to have the same friends move to the same area you were going to later on. But that, even until probably 10 years ago, every 4 years I got that desire, we got to pack, we got to move, And watching Dad go through the chain of command through the military and up to the full rank of a colonel, the hours that he put in, it was amazing to think, it's, wow, you have dedicated 23 and a half hours a day almost, it seems sometimes. We didn't have, he wasn't home every day at 5, the deliveries unfortunately come at all times of night and day. So if he was on call, you may not see him. But when we did have time, we got to travel and see many of the castles. And I remember once we were driving in the van, and I don't even remember where it was, but Dad slams on the brakes, and he's like, all right, one of you boys get out of the van. What, did we do something that bad? You're kicking us out? No, he's like, get right there, get out. What? What do you mean? So we opened the sliding door and looked down, and there's a wallet there. This wallet is full of money. My brother and I are like, yeah, we just hit the jackpot. This is going to be good, you know. Sure enough, you know, we're going through this wallet, and we get back in, and Dad's like, well, that's fine, give it here. No, we found it. No, give it here. We're like, okay, you know, maybe we'll get something out of this. No, he drove us to the nearest police station and turned it in. We're like, Dad, there's no ID in it. There's nothing. You know, I think we were probably 7, 8 years old at the time. It's like, no, that's given to us. There's no ID. He's like, no, we have to do the right thing. You know, and it was like, oh, okay, what's that? He says, well, we need to turn it in. We turn it in, they get our name and address and phone number, and I was just like, yeah, we're never gonna see that. 6 months later, we get a package from the police department, you know, and Dad's like, see, if you do the right thing, it will come back to pay you back. And I kind of tried to do that throughout my life, you know, with the opportunities that they have given me. I want to extend those to the people I meet. I don't know how many of you know that I was adopted into their family. So that has stuck with me since. They have given me the opportunities I probably could not give, you know, have gotten growing up. And one of the things that I chose, and my wife chose, was to put ourselves as a foster family and with the ability to adopt. And that we went through the classes for a couple years, and we were able to adopt Josie. Going through the classes, a lot of the people asked, you know, why are you here? It's like, well, why do you ask? It's, well, you have a son, you know, and we have a 23-year-old son. And it's like, you know, what's this about? It's like, well, I want to give back something that was given to me by my parents, you know, the opportunity to go out and live a full life and enjoy it. I want to give that back to somebody. And we were given the opportunity 13 years ago to bring home Josie, and I hope she is enjoying it as much as I was able to enjoy living my life and experiencing the world, not only through my eyes, but through my mom and dad's eyes. Because when I didn't always see the better things in life, they were able to tell me, you know, hey, look at it this way. This is why, you know. And so it's been a fun time, even though in the last few years we've been separated by many, many miles due to my choice of living in Montana. My job keeps me quite busy. We miss the times that we don't get to spend together. And it's sad to say that unfortunately, a lot of the times that we do spend together are in remembrance of our families at funerals and things like that. But in the back of my mind, it's like, you know, enjoy what you're doing. Even though it is a sad occasion, it's the chance to come and spend time with our families that we all need to cherish. And Dad, even though we fought, and like typical father and son, you will always have a special place in my heart. And because of you, I've gotten where I am. And because of you, Mom, that I am who I am. And thank you.
So hello, everybody, and thank you, everyone, for coming today. I'm Greg. I am the younger of the two, and I wrote some things down to talk about, but before I got started, after hearing my brother talk, it just reminded me that once again, he's the more mature one and has far more common sense. So, as usual, I'm come here to make him look good. That's my job. Different ways to describe my dad. You know, and just kind of getting together with family here and hearing Barb and Dwayne give those lovely stories. Most of them, you know, I've never heard before, so it's truly a treasure. it just, once again, just reminds me just how much there was to his life. I mean, just how wide-ranging and kind of complex a person he was. But just in kind of some general descriptions, you know, he was first and foremost, he was a family man. He was a family man in the way that he gave his time. He gave his time to his wife, gave his time to my brother and myself. You know, he, as has been talked about before, he built these storage sheds, and we have one in the back of my parents' house right now, and they're really nice. They're like a little mini barn. And he, you know, designed how to build it, and it's all from wood, and you know, everything's measured perfectly and fits together perfectly. And the first one we built was in Virginia, at the Army base there. And you know, he had my brother and myself out there and had us help build it. You know, we probably didn't have a choice, I would imagine. But you know, it was those things like that, and just building things and all the stuff he did, you know, gave me whatever tiny amount of how-to ability that I have. My ability to change a light bulb definitely comes from him. Randy has taken it far further. He's a mechanic. He's the one who knows all that good stuff. But any ability that I had to do anything like that comes from him. And obviously, the ability that he had for that, as Dwayne and Barbara talked about, was, you know, from growing up on the farm. You know, people grow up on the farm, they learn how to do things. They learn how to make things. You know, he helped us when we were Boy Scouts make our little soapbox derby cars, you know, in addition to the barns. You know, he taught me how to drive a stick shift, you know, and, you know, taught us how to fish. Like we talked about, going hiking everywhere, sightseeing, traveling has been talked about. You know, he took the time to coach my brother and I on a youth basketball team that he created, you know, to give us, you know, opportunity to play on a team sport, and then he coached it. You know, I remember, like, it just as far as him giving his time, you know, there's all kinds of little stories you can think of, but I remember when we were kids and we took a family vacation from Germany to Venice, Italy, and as usual, and I think a habit I've continued to this day, I generally want to eat around 10:30 p.m. at night. You know, it's usually I want to intake a lot of carbs at that time or something like that, and so I said I was hungry, so we were in Venice, and we went to a place that was luckily open, a pizza place or something, and I love pizza, so we got a lot of pizza, and at least at this particular Italian pizza place, they piled on the mozzarella, and my normal eating style is to just inhale it, and I did, and I choked on it. So he not only loved me by taking me to get the pizza, but then he had to, you know, save me with some of his medical training, do a Heimlich maneuver, get me to choke up the gob of mozzarella that was in my throat. Another aspect of him, it has been talked about before, is he absolutely loved animals and he loved nature. It's talked about our family dog Angel that we had for years, you know, and the stories have been told about her. I always remember the image of him driving. We had several VW vans over the years, but he had a blue one when we lived in California and Virginia, but I always just remember, you know, he'd be coming home from somewhere and he'd be sitting in the front seat and Angel would be sitting in the passenger seat, you know, and they were just like the little team like that. He loved taking pictures of wildlife all around the world, and we have pictures all over. You know, he took pictures of bears in Alaska, moose in Alaska. I think there's a picture of a bobcat in Utah, is that right? And just all kinds of wildlife. He loved taking photographs, and he loves wildlife. It's been talked about his love of squirrels. It can't be understated, his love of squirrels. And in his later years, he had many a conversation with a squirrel on the back porch of our house. He had a very good relationship with the family squirrels. He also loved the bird feeders, the birds that would come to the bird feeders on my parents' back porch, and had quite the conversational aspects with them too. Some birds are more evil than others, I've learned, and some got yelled at, some were friends of the family. In Virginia, I remember he would taught us how to trap opossums in the backyard. He made a little box with a stick and put some cheese for him, and we'd trap him. You know, we'd let him go, but it was just, you know, being close to nature and seeing a big fat possum there. I remember in Virginia, like, we would go for hikes and stuff, and there was, we were in the backwoods on a military base, and they allowed bow hunting of deer back there. I remember one time he saw hunters, and I guess maybe they were closing on a deer. I don't really remember the details, but he yelled. He like made all this noise to scare the deer. So yeah, I don't know that, you know, in these days the way people are, that might have turned into a pretty bad history. But that was just the way he was. He felt this great sense of justice and purpose for the deer, and but it's just kind of a part of his personality. It's true about his love of trees, and obviously he got that, I think, from his father in a lot of ways, who was another great arborist of the world. And if you've been around my dad for any period of time traveling in this area, you've heard him say, well, there's an old growth tree. He loves saying that if he saw a big tree, that's an old growth tree. And he talked about how there used to be, the forest used to be full of the old growth trees, the big trees. And I remember when we went on that trip to Centralia, the family trip, there was an antique shop down there, and he saw a picture of it was like from the 40s or something, a black and white picture of an old logging truck with one of the really giant trees, you know. I don't know how far around, but just one of those ones that looks almost cartoonish how big it is on the back of the truck. And we bought that picture, and that picture, we put in his room at the room where he passed away, and that was one of the, excuse me. That was one of the, you know, the last material items that traveled with him in this world. Yeah, it's been talked about, you know, how he loved to travel, and I'm not going to go into more into any of that because we've talked about that a lot. You know, he definitely had a chance to explore. He loved, you know, he had an adventurous soul, and he definitely took all the opportunities that life gave him to travel around the world. Just one, when we were kids in Europe, you know, it was during the 70s, during the Cold War, there was a lot more U.S. military in Europe at the time, a lot more than there is now. I mean, we had over 500,000 military in and around Europe. And it was a really cool thing you could do. You could go to any Air Force base and just check if there was a cargo plane flying wherever, and you could just jump on it. It was called space available travel, and we did that often. And it gave us the opportunity, even though my dad was stationed in Germany, to travel to Spain. I think we used that to travel to Spain and to Italy and maybe Greece. And I remember one trip we went to Spain, and all of us went down there, but it wasn't like a airline plane ticket where you had a definite seat. So you sometimes had to be flexible, and I remember it was on our return trip back, we didn't have seats that day, and they said there'd be a few seats on the next day, and then I think my mom and my brother actually took the train back to Germany, and my dad and I waited for this one flight the next day. And this was in Spain, and we got on the plane, and this was a C-130 cargo planes, the ones with the propellers, the Air Force planes you see with the propellers. They've been around since Vietnam. It's a very standard-looking plane. You probably see them in movies or this or that. And you don't really have windows, so you're just sitting there really loud in back. So you don't necessarily, like as a kid especially, I didn't even know I thought we had taken off like 30 minutes before that, but we had just been sitting on the ground. It's just so loud and shaky you don't really know, and you're in the back. And all of a sudden, a bunch of just flash went through the back, because it's just open cargo with just like the metal framing and stuff. A bunch of flashes went back through the back, and everyone's looking around, the other people in back, and then they announced that they had to go back to and land to the place in Spain we came from. We were like, well, why don't we just go to Durham? We're almost there. We've been on the air for hours, but no. Like I said, we thought we'd been in the air for hours because we'd actually been just sitting on the ground and it'd been noisy. Well, the plane had been hit by lightning in the nose. And so they landed, they said, okay, we'll have another plane for you tomorrow. So my dad, being the creative person he did, he talked to the local clinic there at the Air Force Base and enabled us to be able to sleep on the operating beds that night. He was a very, very crafty individual over the years. Always looking for a deal, always looking for a bargain. And so we got a flight the next day on another C-130 to Germany, and we flew to Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany. And we flew, and when we were landing, it was like rough, it like banged or something, and then it went back up again. And they announced, and we were like, what's going on? And then they announced, they said, well, you know, that was kind of a rough landing. We knocked out an engine, and we're gonna probably come around again. Or they said we have to go to this other airfield where they have more emergency equipment available. And it was this bumpy ride because I guess we were without an engine. And the story we learned later, they had a young pilot and they were training him to land, and they trained him and he did it wrong and dipped the wing and hit an engine or something. I don't know. And so we kind of went along to Frankfurt where they had more emergency stuff, and it's like a bumpy ride, and all these Air Force and servicemen are like throwing up because it's all bouncy, and I just was sitting there. I was 8 years old at the time. And then we landed. We saw that they were putting like foam down on the runway, but everything worked out okay. I don't even know where I'm going with this story now. It's just one of these stories I just remember with my dad. It was just like a wacky adventure. So other things that happened, he was able to take us to Morocco. We took a boat from Spain over to Morocco, so it's an experience I'll never be able to imagine that, I went over there. When we were kids, I don't know if it'll be interesting, I don't know if Randy remembers this, but we had one of the early Subarus. Now you see Subarus everywhere. It's kind of like a rite of passage in the Pacific Northwest to own a Subaru. But we had one of those early Subaru wagons in the 80s. The early ones was kind of this unique, quirky thing, a little 4x4 mini wagon that was an import car. And I guess in my dad's mind that equated to a 4x4 super truck. And so we were on a family vacation down to Florida, and we were stopped by the beaches of North Carolina, which are beautiful beaches on the East Coast if you've ever been there. But you get North Carolina, Virginia, South Carolina, the line between beach entertainment and 4x4 gets crossed. There's a lot of people who see the beach as just a good place to drive your 4x4. And my dad said, oh, well, we have a 4x4. We have a Subaru wagon. And so we just drove right into the sand like all the other big trucks with the locals from North Carolina who knew what they were doing. And, within about 20 feet, we were stuck up to the wheel wells in sand. And one of the big trucks, luckily, was nice enough and pulled us out. So just those little memories are just where we were kind of embarrassed. We're like, oh, what's going on? Typical, family vacation stuff. I remember we flew down to Florida, to Miami for a family vacation one time, and at the airport, some guy said, hey, I got tickets for the Dolphins game. I got to go out of town. Anyone want them? And within 10 minutes, we were sitting at the Dolphins game after arriving in Florida. So just little fun memories like that. Just talking with my mom and the other people speaking here today and going over my dad's life for the last few years as he's kind of passed away, I always knew the incredible kind of things my dad had done and professionally and just, I don't know, his intellect, his ride and all that. But it just, even the last few years I just learned more, it's just mind-blowing to me, the amount of energy and creativity that he had. Like, I just can't even comprehend it. It's just, all the books that everyone's talked about so far, all the things he's done. But just random creative things that just popped out of nowhere. And I think it's outside on the display, there's a little shadow box with a little boat in there. And there's another shadow box with an owl. And my dad made both of those. And who knows, where did he get this idea from? Just popped in his head, I want to do this. And just the interesting of a mind that just is always thinking about doing something like that. And the little boat, he carved it out of balsa wood and used toothpicks for the where the sails go and the masts and stuff. And then he used for the for the rope that would be with the sails, he used surgical thread, because that's what he had. So he just the creative stuff that he did is just really fascinating. He loved interacting with people. He absolutely loved it. He couldn't control himself from not doing it. Like, it was just, with him, it was like breathing. And it was interesting, the story Dwayne told about him winning the race, and my question would be, how did he win a race driving on cones while still trying to talk to someone in the back seat? Because, and something when they say, and my wife's turning to my brother right now saying that I do that too, which is very true. I get that from him. Yeah, so he couldn't stop talking. He just loved people. He loved to interact with people. And I know we have a lot of the neighbors from the neighborhood here today, and I appreciate all them coming. And it's just, he just loved getting to know people and talking with them. I think he just had a soft spot in his heart over the years for people who just had a really hard lot in life and had to work hard. I don't have any specific examples of that. I just know over the years, he always took interest in people who just did the kind of day-to-day jobs and never felt above anybody. And then I'll just end it with, I think he just had a sense of loyalty and duty and love to family, to God, and to country. In his later years, I saw, I think his faith grew a lot deeper. Listening to the Loma Linda services on the internet and stuff like that. Also saw in his later years his the way he showed his love for my mom and his appreciation for my mom as he developed, more physical kind of limitations and mental limitations, and it can't be understated how much work my mom did and the love she showed for my dad over the final years. He loved Randy and myself. Don't get me wrong, we butted heads a lot. I will plead the fifth on a lot of things from my younger years here today. But I always knew, as Randy stated so well, that I always knew he always loved me. I always knew my mom always loved me. He loved all his grandchildren, and I've always seen that, the way he talked about them, the way he treats them, the way he wants to teach them things and share time with them when he was around. And I just remember in the last, 10 years or so, especially since we moved back here when I got out of the Army in 2006 to be kind of near my parents. And I just remember he would always call me every so often and, just to say hi, tell me what to do. Give me instructions. But, I knew it was his way of just connecting and showing me that he loved me. And, as a lot of people are likely to do, and we get in life and we look back on things, we always say, oh man, I should have been nicer then, and I should have been, this or that. And I do feel bad. So many times I was busy and I was like, oh, Dad's gone again, he's gonna, and I'm tired or this or that. And but I remember after he started going downhill mentally, and we would call him. A lot of times my daughter would call him with me and stuff, and we'd just call him to try to have some communication. And I remember when we tried to those communications, I would think back to the other phone calls. I'm sorry. And I would think how much I miss those phone calls. And I just know he loved me
He loved his family. And my wish is that when he's in heaven, that he understands that all of us appreciated him. And that all of us loved him too. I love you, Dad.
Let's pray together. Father, as we have enjoyed seeing so much, as we reflect one more time on a relationship with you that was so dynamic in Russ's life, I want to pray that you'll just now bless us in this few moments remaining. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, Russ is the second OBGYN I got to know. The first was my mom's third husband. She married 4, buried 3. This was the third. He was a very godly man, one of my mentors. There's something about OBGYNs that they seem to have in common. They both grew up in the rural farming communities. They both had humble beginnings. They both knew how to work hard. They both love nature. I think you learn to do that when you have a lot of screaming women that you deal with frequently in their most trying moments of life. They both loved singing, and they had wives that played piano, and that brought a lot of joy in their life. They both traveled the world. They both knew pain. They knew their own personal pains, and they knew the pain of others, and they both were in severe car accidents. One very debilitating for Russ, especially having long-term effects in latter years. The other OBGYN lost his wife, and he was driving. Then he married my mom a few years later. They both know long hours. They both know calls in the night. They both know the joys and the sorrows that happen in those obstetric rooms where births and sometimes stillbirths occur. They both know pain. Pain management is a very delicate and difficult thing. But I want to do something a little different, sort of, to shake it up. I want to do a word cloud, and I want to involve you for a minute. So I want you to think for a moment of Russ in a word. I have about half a dozen or more written down here, but I want to see what you all come up with. You know what word clouds are. You kind of go like this, and then you get this big cloud, and you write a bunch of words in there, and that doesn't work very good. We'll see if this one does. Bottom of the cloud's a little better. Maybe we'll get a good one. Let's try it. A word. Russ in one word. You can call it out, raise your hand, whatever. Just any word. Talking. What? Talking. How many know that Russ could talk? And talk a lot? How many of you ever, you ever think of coming up for air? You know, kind of talk. But, interesting? Man, wow. Stories? Wow. Another word. Caring. Go ahead. Caring. Yes. You can't do his job without having some care. Very caring man. Anyone else? Another word. Resilient. Resilient. Okay. Another word. Adventurous. Adventurous. Another word. Industrious. Industrious. Humor, and then back over here.
I always remember him humming a lot. Humming.
Humming. It's a life needs a soundtrack, and sometimes you got to supply it. Anyone else? Another word. You can go professional, occupational, whatever. Determined. Interesting. And these, what's really kind of funny is when I offer this out and we're doing this, it's just interesting to see my list and your list. Anyone else? Any other word?
Unique.
Unique.
Only one of him.
Yep.
Versatile. Versatile.
Versatile. I think that's how you spell it. If you misspellings, that's okay.
In charge. That's 2 words, but
In charge. What? I use the hyphen. It works. It's still the one word. Creative. By the way, both OBGYNs love to work with wood. They both were handy with tools. They both were creative. They both like to build things. He built his own house. Yeah. Selfless? Selfless. That's one. It's a good word. None of you put some of the obvious. We'll go on here. He was a writer. He was a poet. He was a singer, a photographer, a doctor, a scientist. He was a philosopher. He was a colonel, full, you know. He was a husband, a father, a soldier, a missionary, and a caretaker of a family. Russel J. Thomsen, though I have one word that none of you have. I chose the word, and I'm going to develop it. It's the word sense, and it needs to be developed. And I'll get to it in a second here. I'd like to begin with two passages that apply to this occasion. Proverbs 3:13 says, and this, I believe, would be a text for Mabel, your mom. Blessed is the person who finds wisdom and the one who obtains understanding. Russ was a wise man. His mom's favorite verses dealt with get wisdom. She was a wise woman, and she wanted her sons and daughter, she wanted to instill wisdom. Just chase after it, and he did. Everywhere. Second verse, Romans 8, verse 18 says, "For I consider that the sufferings of this present time aren't worthy to be compared with the glory that will be revealed to us." I'd like to begin by saying that I'll be sharing the perspective of Russel Thomsen from the perspective of being his pastor for the last 12 years. And a little bit different take on him because I wasn't privileged to see him in all these other capacities as much, though I am acquainted with some of the stories, and they're amazing stories, and now I see some pictures of them and I hear the people involved, and it changes my pictures of him a little bit. At his WWC graduation, he said, and he wrote about it in the big thick volume, that's the one I have, I also have the other one, but the big thick volume, he said, "I knew a lot about a little," and that's like medicine too. You learn a lot about a little narrow thing. But the Russ I knew actually, you know, by the time I met Russ, he actually knew a little about a lot of stuff. Besides a lot about a little, he also knew a little about a lot. And it was quite impressive. He was truly a generalist, someone who gathered wisdom in all the travels and all the places he went to, and all the people he knew and got to meet, all the characters and the people, and always from the perspective of all the things you have here, this caring, unique, selfless, humorous, determined, humming, talking, resilient, in-charge person, interacting with all these people in all these places. And also, by the way, we shared passions in common. We both loved travel. We both loved education. We both loved constantly learning stuff. He loved creation evolution issues, which was my area, and we talked about that for a lot of times, and he enjoyed engaging in the interface between science and the Bible and the philosophy of it all. He was always fascinated by it and always ready to engage, and he loved the Bible because he had a master's, he got his MA in biblical studies. He loved the Bible, and he loved the interface of the two books, so that's why you have this wisdom, the medicine of the Scriptures, because he wanted to show the logic of Scripture as well in those kinds of areas, and the wisdom that is there if people want to look for it and why maybe some things were the way they were. Now to sense. The one word I have is sense. It's a faculty of perception. Sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, emotions, pitch. It's the foundation of science. They do things through their senses, measurables, repeatables, those kinds of things. But it also is the idea of sense that leads to meaning, import, interpretation. It's the sense through which our senses, plural, which we understand and get wisdom. And in no particular order, here's some sense that Russ made. He had a sense of duty. Twice I've heard that, both times from Greg's lips. He was a soldier. He knew what it was like to be loyal. He knew what it was like to do your job. He knew what it was like to be in charge, to take charge, but to know how to take charge is one thing, and to do it right might be another. I remember the one thing he does quote is that he was told by when he wrote these letters about the Dalkon shield, he was told by his army superior, don't embarrass the army. His big fear was we got this young guy going off to D.C. in front of all these senators, don't embarrass the army. You're coming from Louisiana, all this other stuff. I can just see the baggage on his superior officer, and he didn't. He elevated the reality, and the letters proved it. He had a sense of honor closely to it, first to God, then to family, then to patients, then to country, not always in that order because it's difficult to juggle all these lives. And I think juggling could be something you could write on that board, increase the word cloud. He was someone who could juggle everything and do it well. Yeah, sometimes you drop a ball or two. I think everybody does. But it's amazing how many he can keep going. He could do that. He also had common sense. That's what you get from being raised on a farm. That's one thing you learn, if nothing else, what really works and what makes sense. It's a great skill for diagnosis when you're a doctor. If you have that first going in, a lot of times you'll catch what you need to catch, whether it be leprosy or whether it be a tubal pregnancy, and you save someone's life because you learned. He had a sense of time and place. He sensed things that needed to be done and when they needed to be done. He had a sense of related to the scientific method. Though a doctor, he loved to do science. He loved to actually sit down and see how, more the mechanical side, i.e. the collection. But he knew how things worked and how they didn't work. That was maybe the mechanical side. I mean, how many knew the camel was probably the first animal in the world to experience having an IUD put in? Raise your hand if you knew about that one. Yeah, you guys did. Yeah, 3 of you did. Yeah. You have to read the book. But there's a lot of stuff in there. You pick up lots of stuff. You learn a lot about everything. A little bit of everything anyway. He had a sense of aesthetics, though. He had a sense of aesthetics. He loved and appreciated beauty, whether it be found in nature and music and hymns and people and animals and sweet peas. He had a sense of aesthetic, much higher sense than most people I've met. He was up there. His appreciation of beauty was just, wow. This guy really likes this stuff. Let's wait till that sun is just right kind of stuff. But one thing I really appreciated when I read his book was he had a sense of gratitude, especially for the people who helped him. People like Emil Osterby, and Mr. and Mrs. Jones. Yep. He was thankful for people. I mean, Mr. and Mrs. Jones were a childless couple who loved Barbara and Russ. And she let Russ go rummaging through her house, as little boys would like to do. and explore. And then she was generous and would give things like gold coins and money to them too. It's like, okay, but he was grateful for all the teachers, all the professionals, all the people whose shoulders he stood on to become who he was. And his book bears it out. I forgot, I was going to count all the times and put them in, but there were many people he stopped and just really showed a humble gratitude that if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be who I was. He had a sense of gratitude. If you really want to know someone, really want to know them, you don't just trace all the achievements, you trace the tears. Because the tears always mark our highest highs and our lowest lows. The most real and authentic you is found in the story of your tears. And they're also found in the story of his tears. And Russ knew tears too. At least the Russ I knew, especially at this stage in his life, the last 10 years or so. This life had obviously many ups and it had its downs. He also had a sense of calling, which, when it combines the spiritual and the manner in which he went about his work, he had a sense of calling to medicine. I know his mom wanted Dwayne to be a doctor, and he decided to go just fizzle out and become a nuclear engineer. But, someone's got to carry on. But because his mom was in tears, because his mom had a brother who was a doctor who was killed with their son in an accident in the Yakima River or something to that effect. And maybe it was the calling that helped make the mom proud, or whatever it was, but maybe God leads in these ways, who knows. He had also what I'd call sensitivity. Sensitivity is when the hearing and the perceiving and the empathy and the sympathy and the compassion come together. And often tears rolled down his face. In my visits with Russ, tears were something that flowed freely. They'd flow freely from physical pain. They would flow freely from relational pain. They'd flow freely when you read his life in social pain. Yes, there were tears of joy and tears of seeing beauty, and he knows what it means to get a shiver when you're singing. When you're singing a song and the words and the music just match and you get that spine-tingling aesthetic. He knew what a shiver was. And I suspected there were times when he would be singing with Tina playing at the piano on a Friday night, and he'd get a few small shivers as he would sing over her shoulder. When the words and score are matched, it feeds your capacity for hope, eternity, a better life, because you know you were made for this a whole lot more than you were made for just tears of sorrow. Russ and I shared things like in the beginning we'd talk about Genesis, and the first thing that when you think of the chapters of Genesis, we think of all sorts of things, but Russ began to think of the hormone Pitocin, because he said Eve gave birth to a son, and he understood that if it wasn't for Pitocin, he thought about it this way, if it wasn't for Pitocin, Eve could have hemorrhaged when she delivered Cain, and if there wasn't Pitocin working, she never would have stopped bleeding, and that would have been the first and last birth. And he said he was wondering if he was the very first person that thought that thought. And it's sort of funny in its own way. But that sort of led to the reality that we are all fearfully and wonderfully made, and this world is in an accident. And no people are accidents. Everyone's genuinely wanted and loved. Russ, of course, talk was obviously the first word. It probably should be in some sense. But he loved telling his story. He was a writer. And he loved to talk about the world he's seen, because he's seen a lot of it, a whole lot more than most people. He graduated from the Loma Linda University, whose motto is making people whole, and he wanted to adopt that toward every patient he ever labored for, was to help make them whole. It's an ambitious goal, and actually it's an over-ambitious goal, but a very noble target. But the one thing he was most sensitive to in some ways was pain management. Pain comes in many forms. It is also helping and taking on the pain of others. As an army woman, he tells the story of an army woman who was seeking pregnancy so she could get discharged. Romans 8 says, "For I consider the sufferings of this present time," it's talking about wisdom here, putting pain into perspective. "I think of the sufferings of this present time not worthy." From poverty, the suffering of poverty, he grew up in a home that was not wealthy. He grew up, you don't know about his tonsillectomy and almost bleeding to death. Tuberculosis, vaccinations with needles that the veterinarian was using, and you don't know whether the last person that got the shot with that needle was a horse or you or what, but he got all of his shots from the vet because you were poor. And of course, the accident in 1964. There's the social pain that sometimes are these things. He was able to you can manage pain well when you can put it in perspective. And if there's someone that needs to be able to put pain in perspective and not get overwhelmed when a woman's screaming her head off at you, when you're on a delivery table, you have to be able to put all the pain in perspective and know what pains pass and what pains don't. And you're very sensitive to pain, the pain of others. These are not worthy to be compared to the glory that will be revealed. For we know, here we have common knowledge, the text goes on in Romans 8, for we know the whole creation groans and suffers the pain of childbirth. He would just nod. He knew what that was. He'd seen it in so many faces and so many forms. And he could see it not just in the women on the table, delivery table, but he could see it in the world about him. He could see it in the face of a man like, not this man. This man actually was the sense of gratitude. I should have probably had his picture. There is a Russian soldier he met on the Black Sea, and he has all of his medals, and Russ was wearing his colonel uniform, and this man, they met and they said hi, and he just says, "I am so grateful for Americans. We shot with American guns. We ate American food. I love Americans." Of course, he was a World War II vet, and he was a Russian. Gratitude. But anyway, it goes on, and then he met this guy. Oh, there's a gulag. There's one of his famous pictures of the helicopter leaving a gulag. You're aware of all the pain that was associated with these kinds of camps. The death, the suffering, the lack of pain management, the pain infliction, like on a guy like this. Russ would befriend and take a picture of a man like this who, at 14 years old, was conscripted in the Russian army in early 1942. Things weren't going so well, if you recall, for the Russia at that time. He got captured by the Germans and spent 3 years in a German prisoner of war camp very early on in 42. But that wasn't the worst. The worst was coming home and being called a traitor. Betrayed. The deep pain management of betrayal and being sent off to one of these gulags to work the forests and the mines. Very noble candidate for any story in any book. On pain management is becoming a friend and helping the world understand his story. We know the whole creation groans and suffers the pain of childbirth. And not only that, but we ourselves groan. We who love Jesus, who have the Spirit, the first fruits, we groan within ourselves. So creation's growing. All of creation is groaning. We are groaning. Groaning are, by the way, tears. Groaning are tears when your tear ducts are dry, when the lacrimal glands can't produce anymore. All you can do is groan. And Russell knew groaning. I heard him groan. I'd show up and he'd go, "Oh, Pastor," because he was in a lot of pain. And sometimes the "oh, Pastor" meant, "Why haven't you come here sooner? You should have been here more often. What are you doing, you slacker?" That's how I sometimes would feel. I wasn't, but wasn't that. It was also, I'm hurting, and I can't control my own pain. My back is really killing me. I don't sleep at all. I'm burdening my wife. I'm burdening my family, but I don't want to die. I don't want to, and it's just it's difficult. It's difficult. But it says that the Spirit groans. The text goes on in Romans and says the Spirit is groaning. And it tells us, and the Spirit is interceding. So the groaning and the interceding of the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, are basically prayer done well. And Russel's groans are prayers, because we know what God does with tears and groans. He collects them in his bottle, and he plans on redeeming everyone. Prayer is thus a very stormy work. Whether it's the loud cracks and screams, or whether it's the rolling thunder of groans. I knew Russ when he groaned a lot. It was okay, because after a while, he'd stop groaning and I'd ask him a question. He'd start off with a story. And maybe sometimes distraction is the best medicine, because he'd start telling a story. And a lot of times he was able to finish it and tell me all about a time in his childhood, or a time in this country, or a time in that country, or a time with this episode here or there. And sometimes he'd forget and he'd jumble a story or two, but you know what? I felt like, okay, I might not be here as often as I can be, but at least for a while, I was able to do for him what he did for countless peoples, help manage some pain on this side while we look for something on the other. And that's what we look for. What's really funny is when I got here tonight, this afternoon, I looked at the back of your bulletin. And the passage he has below his poem is, Jesus said, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden." And the passage I'm finishing this message with is the same passage. Come unto me, all ye that labor. In the meantime, how do we go on? How do we go forward? What do we do? In the meantime, what do? We come to Jesus, the one you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, you who are going through the pain management of this world. God says, I don't want you to go through it alone. Accompany someone, but most of all, come to me. Take my yoke, because I am humble and gentle in heart. You know, there's lots of I am statements in the Gospel of John, but my new favorite I am is actually found in the Gospel of Matthew, and it's not really an I am statement as such, but I take it as one because Jesus says, I am humble and gentle in heart. And Russ learned that very well and followed Jesus as his mentor. He said, I am humble and gentle in heart, and when you do, you'll find rest for your soul. I believe Russ does have rest for his soul. And I'm so glad I had the privilege of being his pastor these years and knowing that OBGYNs are a different lot. They do life differently, but they also do life in a way that probably nobody else can. To the level, 4,000 babies, I'm just saying. That's a lot of pain to manage. But that's the easy stuff. And he was good and graceful as he could be managing all the rest, too. Our program says that we have a song. Let's conclude with that thought. Russ's favorite hymn, Because He Lives. I guess that's the first. Is that, is that a list or is that a song we're singing? Okay, wonderful. Let me get out of here and let you have the stage.
God sent his son. They called him Jesus. He came to live and forgive. He lived and died to buy my pardon. An empty grave is there to prove my Savior lives. Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know he holds the future, and life is worth the living just because he lives. And then one day I'll cross the river and fight life's fight. No war with pain. And just like death, he'll turn to victory. I'll see the light of glory, and I know he lives. Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know he holds the future, and life is worth the living just because he lives. Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know he holds the future, and life is worth the living just because he lives. Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know he holds the future, and life is worth the living just because he lives. And life is worth the living just because he
Are there any memories anyone would like to share? There's some that you'd like to share. We have several mics, couple mics down there, and we can pass the mics up here. Orange, you want to share a memory, or are you just helping? Okay, that'd be great. Just checking. I was going to say, otherwise activate the orange mic. Yeah, okay, orange mic.
I knew Russ a little bit in college, at Walla Walla College. We graduated. He was a couple of years behind me. He worked in the cafeteria. And I remember one particular instance. I was born on a farm and had real milk and real cows and all that type of stuff. And one day they had these little half-filled glasses of soy milk. I had never tasted soy milk in my life. And they were passing them out for free. Not much was free in the cafeteria, but he passed that out. And he used to put food on my plate too. Back then, it was you didn't help yourself. They plopped it on your plate as you went through the line. The soy milk was the awfulest stuff I'd ever tasted in my life. And everybody else agreed with it. And I never had another glass until lately. I like it now. It's okay. But that was a good memory of him. Anybody else have any memories they'd like to share?
Still orange.
So I knew Tina for a long time, and I never met Russ. I knew very little about him except that I thought he was a doctor. And we went, I think that it was a Valentine's dinner, and we were sitting with Russ and Tina, and I was very excited to be able to meet him finally. And the entire discussion that night was, I found out he was an OBGYN, I didn't know that, but was about his IUD collection, which was the weirdest dinner discussion. But it was fun. It was.
Over here. Yeah.
My name is Karen, and I'm one of Uncle Russ's nieces. And you've all kind of heard about his zest for life and everything. And I have a lot of great memories, not only of his zest for life, his quirkiness and everything. And I can say that I live to tell the tale about his driving. I think that's the only time I remember him driving and being in a car with him. I think it was a visit when they were stationed in Fort Ord, and he's driving along, and I'm in the back seat, probably with my brother and probably Greg and Randy, and he's driving along and talking passionately about something, and whoa, da 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 da, and he's turned literally like this, the wheel's going like this, and he's turned, and we're like, Uncle Russ, he's like, oh no, it's okay, I know where I'm going, and give me a heart attack. But I think the other part of that is even though they were stationed in many places and weren't always able to be at some of the family events and stuff, there was always a way that they as a family, we would always be able to come together, and he would share things. He was on the medical staff for Reagan's first inauguration, and I remember in the mail arrived cocktail napkins and the dinner menu and all those things, and my mom lovingly put them in our baby books, and we could flip through and look at those. A testament to his quirky sense of humor, I think it was a visit stateside when they were still stationed in Frankfurt. We were having dinner, and he gifted my dad, who was also a physician, a piece of pottery. I'm guessing it was from Italy. It was a very grotesque to some, but humorous to others, surgical scene. There was a patient on a table. There was a nun giving the last rites, a number of surgeons around the table, and there were guts coming out, and there was a basket on the floor with a cat licking the guts. This was kept on a very high shelf with pride in our house, and many a Sabbath afternoon after having guests over for lunch, then my parents would bring that out and say, oh, we've got to show you this great statue that Mom's brother had brought back. So, and I think part of Uncle Russ and on all of his ventures probably got instilled in me. And long story short, I later in life became a nurse as a second career. I worked in the operating room, and now proudly have that same sculpture in my house.
Anyone else? Behind you, Chuck, behind you.
My name's Eric Youngberg. I knew the Thomsens in Monterey. It's good to see you guys. This is anecdotal related to Doc Thomsen's humor. One Sabbath afternoon, I'd been invited, as I often was, to do something with the Thomsens, and we were going over to pick up a general of the Supreme Command of NATO, General Wesley Clark, and we were. He had invited him to go with us. He was caring for his wife. This is a 4-star general, I believe, and at the time it was just Russ, Dr. Thomsen, and me in the VW van, and we were waiting. I was waiting in the van for him because had stopped by the hospital at Fort Ord. Well, he had failed to tell anybody there that I was waiting in the VW bus, and some Secret Service were coming out to check the van to make sure everything was kosher. And while I was waiting, it was a hot afternoon, I had gotten out of the van and walked up and down the sidewalk a little bit, and then stepped right back into the van, and next thing I knew, I was pulled out of the van and thrown on the sidewalk, because here's an individual, unbeknownst to anybody, who's in the van that the Supreme Commander of NATO is going to be sitting in the next minute or so. And I was aghast, and when Doc found out about that, he had a really good laugh at my expense.
Behind you there. Okay.
My name is Wendy Rexon. Our eldest son, Caleb, was hired by Tina to come and help around the house. He was blessed to help pack up that IUD collection to be sent to Loma Linda University. And he helped. Caleb was really good in the kitchen, and he would prepare recipes specifically to Tina's preference. And then when she was gone, he would also cook for Russ, to Russ's preference.
Oh, okay.
Hello, my name is, excuse me, my name is Earl Willis. My wife and I we live in a neighborhood in Silverdale. I got to meet Tina and Russ through their daily walks for probably 15 or so years. And so we befriended each other. And sure enough, he's very talkative. And the problem is, so am I. So we would be sitting there and talking. There would be times when Tina would say, come on, Russ, let's go. Or I'd get in trouble when I got in the house for being out talking for so long. But what I learned here today is that he was quite a brilliant guy. I didn't know all these things that I learned today. And needless to say, I'm very impressed, and I'm glad that I've known him for as long as I have.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you
welcome.
very much.
And David, Uncle Russ's, I was his nephew. Karen's my sister. I have 2 memories of him when I spent the most time with him. One was when we went, my mom and my dad, we went to Vicenza, Italy, and hang out. And he took the time out to show us around. And he wanted to take a lot of pictures of me in different areas. He decided I was a senior in high school. And so I have this one picture of, there's a bunch of graffiti in this one location he thought was a perfect spot where I should lean up and try to look cool. And the other thing that stood out was there's this statue that everybody is supposed to touch the breast of the lady that's there. And he was adamant that I had to have my picture taken with my hand placed on the breast of the statue. The other memory where I spent a lot of time with him, shortly after they first moved to Silverdale, my mom and I came up here, and I think he got a boat through the Navy, a small boat, and he took me out on the Sound, just the two of us. We went fishing. I don't think we caught anything, but it was fun. But it was about the time of the O.J. Simpson trial, and he was very into that trial and spent a lot of time talking to me about it, everything that was going on, the strategies and what he thought was happening and what the outcome would be. It was an enjoyable experience, just having that time to get to know him out on the Sound with him.
Anyone else? All right. Well, someone's pointing. There. Oh.
Hello, I'm Carissa, and I was a part of the Pathfinder group a few years ago, still am. I know that we went over and talked to Dr. Thomsen for several hours, or he talked with us. He had several amusing stories from his past, and we learned a lot about squirrels, and the particular ones that lived out in his yard. We played the piano for him, and I know he really enjoyed that, so fun memories.
Thank you. All right. I believe there is a song. It's found in your hymn notes, number 214. We Have This Hope. Now you might be able to find a few. I'm sorry, those on the front row actually will be shortened because maybe someone can pass one over to you. Let's stand for a benediction. And right after our service, there is a reception across the street at our church school, and it's all set up there. There's lots of food. So if you are a little bit hungry, if you leave hungry, it's your own fault. There's lots of food. Come and fellowship and hear some more stories. There's a whole lot more. Trust me. Let's pray. Father, we are just so grateful. We're so grateful that you blessed us with lives of people who live life for you, live life fully, live life amazingly, Lord. And we just want to thank you that your Spirit works through people who are willing to work with you. We thank you for Russ. We just now pray that you will comfort the family, even though it's been a while and we moved on some. Lord, there's many times when we just need to know that you are near us as well, and that you will one day keep that hope fueled in our hearts, that we do look forward, that a great reunion is ahead, and we so long for that. It can't come soon enough. In the meantime, keep us in your care. Help us have that hope before us. Bless us now with your Spirit's presence as we go forth and share together.